This is Chasing the Horizon, a podcast by, for, and about motorcyclists. I'm your host, Wes Fleming, and this is episode 26, released on the 2nd of July, 2018. Thanks for joining me. Welcome to Chasing the Horizon, brought to you by the BMW Motorcycle Owners of America. Subscribe through your favorite podcast player or app, or stream from the website at horizon.bmwmoa.org. Thanks for joining me and all our other regular listeners. One of the reasons I started this podcast is because there wasn't a podcast out there doing exactly what I wanted to listen to. A big part of that is talking about the motorcycle industry and what's going on from week to week with the people who build the bikes we ride and love so much. That's one of the reasons why I've included a news segment in all but 2 episodes so far. When it comes to motorcycles, I try to leave my personal politics out of it, and wait, don't turn off the show yet. I'm going to continue to do that. I try to leave politics out of Chasing the Horizon completely, but in this episode, I need you to give me a little bit of leeway. Keep listening. It's impossible right now to completely ignore politics when U.S. President Donald Trump and iconic motorcycle manufacturer Harley-Davidson are engaged in a war of words in the news and on social media. I think I can give you the basics of it without delving too deeply into the political side of it, and that's what I'm going to try to do. I'll tell you right up front that I am not an economic expert. Hell, I can even barely balance my checkbook, which is probably similar to most people that are listening. I don't mean to denigrate you, but who knows how to balance a checkbook anymore? At any rate, you don't need to be an economist to know that governments around the world use tariffs to promote and protect their own internal industries. Tariff is really just a fancy word for tax. For instance, what's happened recently in the U.S. is that the government, which is headed by Donald Trump, has put tariffs on aluminum and steel coming into the USA from other countries. What this does is makes those things more expensive when they're imported. The idea being that because foreign-made steel is now artificially more expensive, manufacturers in the U.S. will then buy U.S.-made steel to make their products. It would take somebody far more knowledgeable about global economics to explain to you if, how, and why that all works. But what I can definitely tell you is that in the wake of these new tariffs on aluminum, steel, and other things, the European Union said they will put in place tariffs on all U.S.-made motorcycles 500 cc's and larger being imported into their economic zone. That includes every single motorcycle made by Harley-Davidson. Harley then announced that they were going to start producing some of their motorcycles in the European Union because the tariffs going both ways were going to raise the cost of one of their motorcycles by $2,200 or more. When the price of a motorcycle goes up that much, there's only 2 things to do. Pass the rise on to the customer, which is going to cut way down on sales, or absorb the cost. Harley said that if it absorbs the cost of the tariffs, they stand to lose up to $45 million from now through the end of this year. One of the results of this announcement was watching Harley's stock price drop about 8% in just a little over a day. Another result is this war of words going on between Harley and the President of the United States. A lot of people, from professional economists down to, well, me, have chimed in on this. One of the things that people are saying is that Harley would be crazy not to do what they said they're going to do. Europe accounted for 38% of Harley's sales in 2017. So even without a rise in the tariffs, it probably makes good financial sense for Harley to be making some of those EU-destined bikes in the EU. One thing Harley said was that no bikes they sell in the USA will be made outside of the country. And that's something they've been saying since early 2017 when they announced their new assembly plant in Thailand. They reiterated this when they announced the closure of their Kansas City plant and the move of about half of those jobs to their decades-old plant in York, Pennsylvania. I'll include a bunch of links in the show notes, which you can get to at the website, horizon.bmwmoa.org. And some of those links might be slanted this way or that way in the political spectrum. I just want you to know that I don't endorse any publication or any specific story. And frankly, unless I wrote it, I may not agree with what they're saying at all, for all any of us know. I encourage everybody interested in this topic to read widely about it because tariffs are used like this all the time to influence companies and governments around the world. It only matters to us on this show when it comes to motorcycles. On the heels of Harley's announcement, Polaris announced that they are looking at offshoring some of the production of Indian motorcycles as well. Jess Rogers, Indian's spokesperson, did not say that Polaris is definitely moving some production out of the U.S. She was clear that they're only looking at it as a way to improve their financial position. Frankly, and I said this before, they'd be crazy not to, because, like Harley-Davidson, Polaris is a public company, and as such, they have a financial responsibility to their shareholders to constantly examine their business practices and find ways to increase profits, thereby increasing dividends they pay out to their shareholders. That is simply how business works. Polaris was a little more specific than Harley has been, though, and they said that if they do this, it would be more a function of moving jobs from Iowa to Poland than creating new jobs from scratch at their existing facility in Poland. That facility currently makes off-road vehicles and can handle about 500 employees. Right now, about 650 people work at the Polaris plant in Spirit Lake, Iowa. That's the place they're talking about. Based on the questions asked during Polaris's recent analyst and investor meeting, a lot of people are paying attention to this issue, which is exactly why I wanted to address it on the show and why I put a new segment in almost every episode. We're all in this together as riders and manufacturers, and the more we know about what's going on all over the world, the better we are able to make decisions that improve the future of motorcycling. Now that that's through, let's get into some fun news. This will be a little quick fire since I spent a lot of time talking about that tariff stuff. Royal Enfield announced the sunset of its Continental GT 535 bike, which was already discontinued in India a few months ago. The impending Continental GT 650 Twin will replace the single-cylinder 535. This isn't a huge surprise, as Royal Enfield is gearing up a huge push behind its new twin-cylinder engines, and frankly, the 535 wasn't a big seller anyway. You can still get one of these neat little cafe racers if you want for a little while. So if you're into big thumpers with ABS as standard and disc brakes on both ends, head on over to your RE dealer. While you're there visiting your Royal Enfield dealer, ask them about electric motorcycles. The dealer may not know much, so I'll give you a clue as to what's going on. Royal Enfield are working on an electric bike in an effort to support India's push for greener transportation. This is a trend that is becoming pervasive across all of India's major motorcycle manufacturers, so it's not a surprise that Royal Enfield is on board. As governments around the world continue to change acceptable emissions standards, I think we're going to see more and more electric bikes. I am so convinced of this that I've already found an expert on electric motorcycles to be my guest on the next episode of Chasing the Horizon. You can expect that episode out in late July or early August, and that one might actually be the last episode of Season 1. We'll see, so stay tuned. Another 650 Twin that's in the news is the new, and I mean all new, Scrambler announced by Norton and scheduled to be unveiled at the NEC show in November 2018. NEC here stands for National Exhibition Centre, and that's spelled RE because it's in Birmingham, England. You may have heard of Birmingham, England before because it's the hometown of Ozzy Osbourne, Tony Iommi, Bill Ward, and Geezer Butler, better known as the first true heavy metal band, Black Sabbath. There's a little trivia for you. This episode's full of it. Anyway, the Scrambler is based on this new 650 Twin being developed by Norton and is expected to put out just under 100 horsepower. That power will be tamed by a tubular steel frame made by Spondon, which is also owned by Norton, and brakes from Brembo, which is not owned by Norton. Reports say Norton will put out two versions of the bike, one a little more off-road oriented than the other, and you can expect the base model to cost a little bit less than 10,000 pounds. Over in the US, that equates to about $13,000. KTM's newest adventure bike was spotted undergoing tests, or at least the pre-production version of the bike was. That is the 790 Adventure R, another parallel twin-engined motorcycle expected to hit dealerships soon. The 790 was designed at the same time as KTM's 450 rally bike, the one that won the Dakar Rally this year. It's meant to bridge the gap between an enduro bike and an adventure bike, though KTM doesn't really define either segment. I would say that an enduro bike is meant more for off-road use, while an adventure bike is meant more for on-road use, though both bikes can obviously cross over depending on the needs of the rider. The 790 Adventure R is expected to have a 5-gallon fuel tank and a relatively low seat height, which might just make it a serious challenge to the new BMW F850 GS, especially given that KTM will be loading the 790 up with high-tech wizardry and quality components. Now, did you know that Ducati produced the first Monster in 1993? That's right, a little more trivia for you. Ducati debuted the Monster at a trade show in 1992 and started production the following year. Here it is now, 2018, and the Monster is 25 years old. Probably older than some of the people riding it, to tell the truth. Ducati has sold over 325,000 Monsters since 1993, and they're celebrating in style by releasing a special 25th anniversary Monster with a massive 1200cc L-twin motor. There will only be 500 of these 25th anniversary Monsters, so if you want one, you better get online now. It will sport a golden-colored frame, forged Marchesini wheels, a number of components machined from solid blocks of steel and aluminum, a tubular steel trellis frame, an aluminum single-sided swing arm, and Brembo brakes to go along with the fully adjustable Öhlins suspension. If this sounds like it might be the most exclusive, most expensive Monster ever, you're probably right. That cutting-edge Tester Stretta engine doesn't come cheap, but you shouldn't expect nearly 150 horsepower from a cheap naked bike. Ducati didn't release a price yet, but they did say Europe gets the bike first in September 2018, followed by Japan in October, the USA in November, and Australia in December. Ducati did mention that you don't have to wait to order yours, though, so if anybody listening orders one, please drop me a line and tell me what the bill's going to be. I promise not to tell anybody that you ordered one. Okay, last and also probably least, here's one final bit of trivia. For riders of a certain age, you'll remember watching the antics of the Cunningham kids and their friends on an American TV show called Happy Days. One of the main characters was a cat called Arthur Fonzarelli, better known to everybody as Fonzie or just the Fonz. He wore boots, jeans, a white t-shirt, and a leather motorcycle jacket, and was quite the ladies' man. Of course, he also rode a motorcycle, which in the 1950s and early 60s aesthetic of the show was very rebellious. What some people may not know is that the Fonz rode a 25 horsepower 1949 Triumph Trophy TR5. They used 3 different trophies for the show, one of which was owned and customized by legendary stuntman Bud Eakins. This particular trophy, the one customized by Eakins, recently sold at auction for $179,200. That's right, a bike that could be expected to pull down about $30,000 in absolutely 100% perfect condition, sold for nearly 6 times that much, and all because Fonzie rode it on television. So the discussion portion of this episode is with a guy called Tom Putnam. He's from the UK, and he's got a new product coming out for motorcycles called the Beeline, which is a navigation tool. And I know that a lot of people in the motorcycle journalism world, like I am, get tons and tons and tons of PR messages, product release messages in their email every day, every week. And most of those, I got to be 100% honest, most of them I ignore. But when I got the PR product release email for the Beeline for motorcycles, I couldn't click on that fast enough. Just the press release was impressive enough to get my attention. And I was glad to be able to reach out to the Beeline folks and get Tom Putnam to come on the show. So, Tom, welcome to Chasing the Horizon. It's nice to meet you.
Hi, Wes. Thanks for having me on. Glad to hear we made it through the filter there.
Yeah, and I know that sounds a little bit harsh, but, you know, when you get so much email about, you know, this new product and that new product, you start to get a little jaded. So it is somewhat rare when something can cut through that so quickly and so easily, which tells me that in my life as a motorcycle rider, there's something missing that would even attract my attention. You know, so and I want to talk about the Beeline, but first I want to talk about motorcycles because I don't know anything about your motorcycling history other than a little bit that I heard on the Cafe Racer podcast from by the time this comes out, it'll be last week that came out. And so here's the thing that I want to ask you first You told Steve on Cafe Racer podcast that you had a 400cc dirt bike, KTM dirt bike, when you lived in Kenya.
Yeah.
So that opens me up to two questions. Number one, how did you end up living in Kenya? And of course, number two, how did you get into motorcycling?
Yeah, sure. So how did I end up living in Kenya? I've actually always had a bit of a connection with Africa. I was born while my parents were living in Zambia. So we've always gone back there quite a lot. I've had friends who live in Kenya. And then in spread over 2012 and 13, me and some buddies did a trip where we drove Land Rovers from London all the way down to the southern tip of Cape Town, over a few legs, but it took us 3 months. And doing that trip really solidified my love for Africa. And as I was doing that, I got this job offer to go and help set up a hotel booking website in Nairobi in Kenya. So I thought it was great. It sounded like an opportunity to test building a business myself and live in Africa. Couldn't be better. So I jumped at the chance and found myself on a plane out to Nairobi to live for nearly 2 years. It's great.
Yeah. So were you already a motorcycle rider when you got there, or was that something that you picked up while you were living in Kenya?
Yeah, I rode before. So I was probably, I guess I was introduced to bikes by my godfather, who has always loved them. He's got a garage full of them, of all sorts. And I used to, when I go and visit him, go and ride dirt bikes around the field, which I always loved. But it wasn't until I finished university, college, that I then went and got my license. So me and a friend went and did the whole course, did all the tests, got licenses, and then I bought a second-hand Honda Hornet, so just a kind of courier bike, nothing special, 600cc, that I used to ride around London or zip around in the countryside around London, and that was my kind of introduction to it on the roads. But yeah, Kenya was great fun because it was this old dirt bike. Like the thing made a racket. You had to kickstart it 10 times to get it going. You could hear it coming from about 5 miles away. But it was great fun because even though it was an old bike, KTM's still got, they're so well built, such good suspension, and I would put it in the back of my Land Rover and then drive it off to where I could get onto the dirt, take it out of the back of the Land Rover, and then just go and blitz around kicking up dust. And God, that was fun. I used to love it.
Yeah, it sounds like really like a lot of fun, and I think it's kind of interesting. You're the third person from the UK that I've had on the show, and the second of those three people to have number one, be born in Africa, and number two, spend a significant amount of time there. So it feels to me like there's a big connection between the UK and Africa in general, just kind of at a cultural level.
Yeah, I guess probably stronger than between the US and Africa, I suppose. I guess there's just a lot of, a lot of Brits living out there from back in the day, like people who are generations and generations old, been out there as well. Not that that's me by any means. My parents were just doing a job out there.
Right.
Yeah.
So you talked about going to Nairobi to help set up the website, experiment with, starting up a business. And obviously that experience has carried through to your Beeline experience and setting up that company. Now, your first Beeline product was for bicycle riders. So how did you get into that? Where did the idea for the original Beeline for bicycle riders come from? It came from really just getting lost on bicycles ourselves. Kind of unsurprisingly, Mark and I were good friends from before, and I talked about riding dirt bikes in Kenya, but actually around London, I would ride I'm told it's not a push bike in the US, like a bicycle. Right, bicycle.
We used to ride bicycles around London. Just instead of getting the metro, it was just an easier, more fun way of getting around. But just found it so frustrating trying to find your way, because what you do is get your phone out, have a look at Google Maps, try and memorize the route, put it back in your pocket, and you ride along for a bit more. You get lost, forget the route, have to pull over, do the same thing, or you try and take it out of the traffic lights. And actually, I didn't think about it at the time, but now we've come on to doing the motorbike thing. I remember doing that on my Honda as well. Mm-hmm. And that was actually the frustration was 10 times as bad, because you can't just hop onto the pavement and get your phone out of your pocket when you've got when you're on a motorbike, you kind of find somewhere to pull in, like take your gloves off, unzip your jacket, to check your phone. So it was that frustration. We just thought, originally we simply thought, wouldn't it be, you could probably find your way better if you just had a compass on your handlebars. And then that turned into being a compass that pointed at the last place you'd chosen in Google Maps, which turned into this kind of multi-waypoint thing, and now has developed into effectively the full routing thing that you see on Kickstarter for motorbikes today.
Yeah, and I'll make sure to post the link to the Kickstarter in the show notes. Although I do have to say that you don't really need any publicity, because your project got funded in, what was it, 8 or 10 hours?
10 hours, yeah. I looked just as we were starting the show, and as we're recording this, we've gone to double the target.
That's fantastic. And I think that just goes to speak to exactly what I said. When you come up with an idea that cuts through everything else, I think people really take notice. And the thing that attracted me to the Beeline initially was the number one, the simplicity, because what I feel, I use my GPS a lot. I move it from bike to bike. So, I have a mount for each of my motorcycles, and I take it with me and move it from bike to bike. But it always feels so rigid. And, sometimes I know when you're out on a motorcycle or a bicycle, you got someplace to be, you're on a mission, you got to go, you got to get there, you got to be on time. But one of the joys of riding a motorcycle is not having anywhere to be, but having all day to get there, but not wanting to be completely lost and knowing you eventually have to come home. And that's what struck me about the Beeline, is that it just feels more like a navigation aid than somebody issuing you orders, if that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. It's and that's what we like about it so much. It's rather than somebody saying in like 500 feet, turn left onto whatever drive. It's just this arrow to follow all the time. And we've made 2 modes in it now. So there is now this like full route guidance mode, which kind of does the first thing you were talking about, when you've got to be somewhere in a hurry, and it makes sure that you take every turn, but still just following this arrow all the time. But the one that what I like most about it is actually the original thing we came up with, which is this kind of what we call compass mode, where it just locks onto the place. It could be 100 miles away, and it's just pointing there saying this direction 100 miles, and you just pick your own way there. That's my favorite way of using it. You just go and explore, find, if you like the look of a road, head down it. You might not get there in the fastest route possible, but you're like you say, you're being nudged in the right direction, but you're completely free to go wherever you want.
Yeah, and I think that's the brilliance of it. From a concept point, is that you need to be somewhere northeast of here, so go have fun. Yeah, and that's what really struck me about it. But so the reason I wanted to talk to you is to talk a little bit about the technology, because one of the reasons I started this show in the first place was because I like to talk to people that know about things that I don't know about. And so a lot of the things that I don't know about are technology driven to a certain extent. So the way that the Beeline works, and correct me if I'm wrong, is you mount it to your handlebar, your fairing, whatever. You can use a tape, or you guys are making mounts that fit on handlebars and things like that. I saw that there's a ram mount option. So there's a lot of different ways you can mount it. You can put it right in your line of sight. You can put a little out of your line of sight, whatever works best for you. And then you just go. So you use an app on your smartphone. Does the app store the maps, or does it use something like Google Maps to drive the mapping portion of it?
So it's our own app. So it's a Beeline app that you're using. But within that app, the way we've coded in the maps is using a Google Maps connection. So a Google Maps API. So it's getting all of its information from Google, but within our own app. Yeah.
Gotcha. So it's your app, but the kind of the back end. So you don't have to push updates. I mean, you don't have to push map updates.
No, exactly. Which is one of the things that I think. Well, I think that it just makes sense in these days. The idea that you buy a GPS and it says, well, you can have North America for free, and like we'll give you one update in 5 years or whatever. Like nowadays that we've got Google Maps, why don't you have the whole world for free, and it's being updated automatically? which is what this connection that we have with Google means happens. The map shows live as Google. I think it's probably worth us saying here that there are probably places where there's a better mapping provider than Google. And if that is the case, we're really open to plugging that in for those bits. So, I don't know, let's say, for example, like Rever Maps was seen as better for North America. It'd be something we'd be really open to going and talking to them and saying, look, could we use that for this area? But at the moment, Google Maps seems to be the best as like a one fit for everywhere. So
yeah. And that's what I tend to use Google Maps when I'm trying to get around town. And I found myself, and here's another thing that attracted me to the Beeline is, I'm not one of those people that wants to mount their phone on their handlebar and put my phone in my line of sight, even if that's my mapping source, because, when I'm out on the motorcycle, I don't want to take a call, and I don't want to know who's texting me, because I might feel like it's so important. If it's my wife or my daughter or something, I might have to, I got to pull over. And then you were saying you got to take off your gloves. You got to, find a safe place to. So I like to keep my phone put away. And the Beeline lets you keep your phone put away, which is the great part. So so here, this might be a weird question, but what do you think was more difficult, developing the unit itself or developing the app?
Good question. I would say that at this point, now that we're looking back over the whole thing, there's been a lot more effort, like a lot more work has had to go into building the app. But at the point when we first sent out the bicycle version, because so much of the app, even for the motorbikes, is built on the foundation of the bicycle one.
Right.
When we first sent out that bicycle one, at that point, all the pressure had been on the hardware and the electronics, because we had to get that. We pretty much had to get that completed before we could send any of them out. Whereas with the app, we could make like the first version it was good, but like it was nothing like it is today. And we could send that out. But then obviously once somebody's received the hardware, it's fixed. We can't go and change this circuit board. But with the app, we can just keep on pushing updates. So every time we want to make it do something else, we want to improve something, improve the search, add satellite view, I don't know, we do that and we push it out and everybody gets it. So now, because we've been going for another nearly 2 years since we shipped that first product, loads and loads of stuff has been going into the app, and the software on the device, which has made it better. So I think that is where most of the work is now. But yeah, the pressure was on at the start with the hardware, for sure. Yeah,
I imagine, and I dabble with app production, mostly from kind of the second populating data and things like that. And it can be a slog, and I'm not even a programmer. I can't even imagine the level of work that goes into writing an app from scratch. So, but I also don't know anything about developing, a new computer is basically what it is. It's a little computer you strap on your handlebar or anywhere else. And I'm actually, I was thinking about the Beeline last night, and I'm already trying to figure out a way that I can use it in my car, so that I don't have to, like I said, I don't have the GPS kind of issuing me orders, which kind of drives me a little crazy, especially if I miss a turn, and then it goes into that whole guilt cycle of having missed the turn and disappointed the computer, and all that. Just
take a U-turn.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe that's my own background encroaching, but so obviously you and your business partner Mark have extensive experience with bicycles. When did you first start hearing rumbles from motorcycle riders that they might be interested in a Beeline? Were people using your bicycle Beeline on their motorcycles anyways?
Yeah, that's where it really started. It was people who had already bought the bicycle one, but who were also motorcyclists, getting in touch with us and saying, "Hey, would this work on my motorbike?" Or sending us pictures where they tried to put it on. And then we had, and then lots of people who hadn't bought it, seeing it on the website, finding out about it, or hearing about a friend who was using it for their bicycle, and sending us a message saying that, would this work on my motorbike? Which actually, to start with, it wouldn't have done, because we had this calibration process which involved standing your bike up on its end. So kind of standing there and doing effectively a big wheelie, which is fine when you've got a little bicycle.
Yeah, a 50-pound bike is different.
Stand up a Goldwing or something like that. That wouldn't really work. But we ironed that out, so you don't have to do that anymore. It just automatically calibrates as soon as you start going. So as soon as we got that bit in, and that actually was a good example of the software improving over time.
Right.
As soon as that was in, we were like, the answer to those people asking about motorbikes was, it stopped being, no, you can't use it on a motorbike, and it became, yeah, you can use it on a motorbike, but you're going to have to hack it a little bit, find a place for this rubber strap to go on. It's not quite perfect for it. The routing's for bicycles. But it was close enough that we thought, well, now's the moment. Let's just do it. Let's make a version of it that's designed specifically for motorcycling. So
what were the design specifications that you had to change or update to go from bicycle to motorcycle use?
The big things are how tough it is, because there's a lot more vibration and high speed. Sure. On a motorbike, so it's the mounting mechanism is a lot tougher, and it's fully waterproof. So it's just a bit more hardy. And then most of the rest of it is in software stuff. So the way it's routing you, the way the navigation to be able to actually guide you around every corner if you want that mode. Because everything happens a lot faster on a motorbike. Right. On a push bike, you can kind of come into a corner and have a think about it and see what it's happening then. With a motorbike, you need to have anticipation to know what you're going to be doing at somewhere 30 seconds down the road from where you are now.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the perfect example of that anticipation. You and especially if you're traveling out in the back country, not back country. I don't mean the desert. I mean rural areas, countryside, where it might be a few miles between turns, so you need to know a little bit in advance, because it might come up. I know now that it's getting into summer, where I live is kind of this weird mix of rural and urban. We have shopping malls and cornfields within a mile or two of each other. And, the farmers will run their cornfield almost right to the edge of the road, and you might miss a road because you can't see past the corn because it's, growing season. I see. Is that something that is somewhat programmable or adaptable? Will it, if you're going 60 miles an hour, will it give you more notice than if you're going 20 miles an hour? Or is it just kind of a straight thing? So in terms of there's a couple of things there. One is the rate at which it keeps up with you. So I don't know if you've ever noticed this with GPS before, but sometimes if you're going fast, a GPS can kind of lag behind you. Yeah, absolutely.
Keep up. So we've put in some kind of smoothing and filter algorithms in there that actually mean that it compensates for your speed. So it doesn't matter how fast you're going, it keeps up with you. So that bit's fine. And then in terms of the anticipation, what it does is from the moment you take one corner, from that point, it's always telling you what's going to happen at the next one. So, for example, if you come around a corner and then your next turn is going to be an intersection, you've got to turn right. What you'll see is this big arrow that's pointing you straight on for 2 miles to that intersection. And you just keep on going in the direction of that arrow, but it's counting down, so you know how far away you are. Gotcha. And there's a little icon around the side that will be pointing to the right. So it's like a little dot that goes around a bezel on the outside, and that's pointing out to the right. So that tells you that the next thing you're going to have to do when this gets to 0 is you're going in that direction. So you've got as far the whole distance between any two decision points or junctions to see that coming.
I think that's a good idea. I'm looking forward to. It doesn't sound like there's a heavy learning curve to get used to using a Beeline, which I think is going to be a great benefit. You've got a couple of icons and a couple of indicators, and there you go.
Yeah. We're trying to make it as intuitive as possible, something that you can just pick up and go. we're still playing with the exact details ourselves. But the next step would be to just put it into people's hands and say, I'm not going to tell you how this works. And if they don't get it, they haven't got it in 5 minutes, then we need to tweak it, change it, make it more intuitive.
Well, and that's what the whole testing process is all about. You find people that can figure it out, and maybe, and not that you would want them to, but find ways to almost break it, to use it in ways that you don't anticipate, that you can compensate for that.
It's exactly what we want to do. Actually, find people who are gonna go and do stuff with it that we didn't want them to do, and see if they can get it wrong, see if they can break it.
There you go.
And the other thing is getting people who are completely non-tech savvy to test it out and make sure they can use it. It's all very well if we sit in our office and play with it and we know what to do, right. But that's because we're a tech company and we do that all day. We need to get somebody who's that 80-year-old whiskered grandpa who's riding around on his Harley still, get him to try it. He knows how to use the compass but nothing else. If he can still use it, then we're doing it right.
There you go. We'll try it out with some Boy Scouts and see if they can find their way around. Now I'm gonna, when I post this episode, I'm gonna put up my show notes and I'm gonna put some pictures of the Beeline in there. So can you give us a rundown on what the controls, what can you manipulate on the unit itself? I know you set it up with the mapping, your destination on your phone, you stick your phone in your pocket and you go, but what are the controls available to the user on the unit itself?
So on the unit itself, you've got 4 touch buttons around the outside, kind of north, south, east, west. And they do, to be honest, it's still up for grabs in terms of what we could control those to do, so it can be changed. What they do at the moment is the up and down ones will skip you through waypoints. So if you decide you're going to change course and you don't want to go via that shopping mall that you were just talking about, you can just skip through it and it'll point you on to the next place. If you've gone too far, you press back and it'll take you back on.
There you go.
And then the left and right ones take you through modes. So you've got obviously the navigation, then you've got a GPS speedo, so a super accurate GPS speedo there. Okay. There's a tracker, so it's just telling you how far you've been riding and how long I'm doing that. Then you've got a battery indicator, so it'll tell you how much battery's left in the device, and of your phone as well, which is in your pocket, of course.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, so you can see if that's going to be running low, and then just some settings, so you can turn the backlight on and off. You can unpair it from your phone, all that sort of stuff. You can do on the device. So still, it's pretty simple stuff, really.
And are those buttons touchscreen buttons, or are they tactile? You got to click. What I'm shooting at is how glove friendly is the unit.
Yeah, it's something we're going to have to tackle. So at the moment they are touch buttons, so you need to either have that weave sewn into the thumb of your glove, so have touch friendly gloves, or pop off a glove. In some ways, I guess there's an argument there that you just don't want to be playing with stuff while you're actually on the move. But it's certainly something for us to have a think about, whether we try and update those to make them so you can tap them with your gloves on. Yeah.
Well, and as glove manufacturers kind of get hip to the modern world, a lot more gloves are coming with that weave in the fingertips.
Yeah, they are, aren't they? Yeah.
And I know there's a couple of people that make a goo that you can apply to your fingers and thumbs and stuff, and really turn any gloves into touchscreen gloves.
Yeah. If you give your gloves a lick, it often works.
Oh, really?
Kind of gross, but I sometimes do it in the winter when I'm riding with leather gloves on my push bike. I just give my thumb a lick and touch them.
Well, I don't know if I'm going to recommend that. I've seen where my gloves go. I lost. It's
not the official line for Beeline. It's not in the instructions.
Yeah, I lost a pair of gloves. I had left them sitting in my sidecar trunk, which is clearly not weather sealed, and they molded. I opened the trunk yesterday, and I've got gloves that used to be black and now they're green and yellow. So they went in the trash bin very quickly. It's always sad to lose gloves to natural causes like that. So I know people can, I'm going to post the link for the Kickstarter so people can go and read about it, but what's your general timeline for, now that you're funded, what's the production kind of outlook? When are you looking to have these in people's hands that they can start using them?
It should be in February of next year. That's
Okay.
that's what the plan looks like, and we're pretty confident in doing that because so much of the electronics are based on what we already make for the bicycle one. We're pretty confident in turning that around in that time frame.
Yeah, I imagine since you're not ground up this time, you're not doing it from scratch. It eliminates a lot of you've already learned lessons.
Exactly, and we can reuse parts from that previous product. It makes life a lot easier to get it right this time. Yeah. And also just the things like even if we were starting from the ground up with the actual product, just the fact that we already have manufacturing partners and factories, they're already tested. We've got all the kind of process for quality assurance in place. Like, we know how to get stuff shipped from China to the US and to the UK. It's all those things that the first time round just took a lot of, we were doing it the first time, we were having to learn all that.
Yeah.
Whereas now we kind of have all that expertise in the team. Know what we're doing.
So it's without getting too far into politics, which I don't want to do, in your country or mine, to tell you the truth. But it's a reality of the modern world that if you are putting out an electronic product, you are almost guaranteed to have to do your manufacturing in China just for purposes of scale and economy. It can be financially impossible to start a new electronic manufacturing process somewhere else in the world other than China. But I'm curious what did you look anywhere else before you found your manufacturing plant or process or whatever it is in China? Did you try, did you think I'm going to try and get these made in the UK or in France or somewhere else like that? Or was it kind of always China was the best option?
Yeah, well, I mean, we definitely looked around when we were doing prototyping for that first product. We were doing prototypes in the UK. But just from talking to people who were experts in the field and looking at the quotes and things we were getting from different places, it really quickly became obvious that, as you say, China is the place to do it, and it's very hard to be competitive if you don't. Both price-wise and quality-wise. Like in Shenzhen, this one city in China, just by Hong Kong, is where pretty much everything, all the electronics in the world are made in this one place. And as a result, just the level of expertise and the machinery and the competence to create stuff there is just so much greater than anywhere else in the world. The factory we use out there, they are a backup factory for making Apple products and for HP and stuff.
Right.
If we turn around to them tomorrow and said, look, Kickstarter went really well, can we have 50,000 units in 2 months' time? They'd hardly bat an eyelid. If we had a UK manufacturer and we said that's them, they'd probably, they'd just go into panic mode. Might be a year before we could get those from them. So it's just the scale and the expertise they have out there makes it very difficult to choose elsewhere. I mean, as you say, for the sake of making things, patriotic reasons, making things at home, or all those kind of political reasons, it'd be lovely to make it in England. But for electronics, just doesn't make sense.
Gotcha. And that's kind of what I thought. I just, I don't know too many people that are directly involved in manufacturing. So I thought I'd ask and see how that goes. And obviously, and I'm not even going to finish that sentence because I don't want to get into politics. But, I can see a lot of different applications for the Beeline, bicycles, motorcycles. I just told you I'm planning on using mine. I got in on the Kickstarter. I just missed the first 100, but I got in right after that. I'm already planning on figuring out how to panel mount it to the dashboard in my car. And let me tell you why. Because my daughter is 16 in the United States. 16 years old is traditionally when you're allowed to get your driver's license. Yeah. You got to jump through some hoops, not quite like you guys do in the UK, but there's some hoops. And one of the greatest fears that I have is that my daughter's going to be farting around on her phone and crash the car and kill herself or one of her friends or something like that. So when I saw the Beeline, I thought, hey, that's a great navigation device for my kid because she can put the route in her phone put the phone in her bag or her pocket or the glove box, and it will tell her when to turn and where to turn, and she'll know when she gets there. And all she has to do is look at an arrow. She doesn't have to interpret anything. She doesn't have to, futz around with anything. She can just look at the arrow, follow the arrow, and that's like following a compass. So I don't know if you thought of that application, but I thought of that application.
Well, it's funny you mentioned it, actually. We had talked about it before, but have you, do you guys ever watch the British TV show Top Gear? It's now called The Grand Tour on Amazon.
And yes, I'm a longtime fan.
Yeah, with Jeremy Clarkson. So there is an episode from last season called Oh Canada, when their challenge in the last 15 minutes of the show is actually all three of them having to drive SUVs towing speedboats to a point in Canada. And the way they are doing it is they have Beeline's the bicycle one, Beeline's mounted in their car, and they've got to get there.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So yeah, if anyone wants to see it in action, in Amazon Prime customers, it's I think the episode is called Oh Canada.
Well, I'll dig it up for sure and put that in my show notes. I haven't made it into the second season yet, and just mentioning Top Gear, I really tried to like the new version of Top Gear without the boys, and it's just not the same without the hamster and Captain Slow backing up Jeremy Clarkson.
Yeah.
And I like, especially like they've done a couple episodes with motorcycles. Richard Hammond is an avid motorcycle rider. So that the one where they I guess they raced a train on a Norton or something was fascinating. At any rate, another application I thought of that I told one of my friends about was he's a hiker. He doesn't ride a bicycle. He does ride motorcycles, but he rides a bicycle, or he doesn't ride a bicycle. He walks almost everywhere he goes, and when I've gone places with him, he's constantly pulling his phone out to check, am I on the right track? Where's my next turn and all that? And I thought, I bet I could figure out a way to mock up a wristband for him so that he could use one, like a watch, and have it right there on him so he doesn't have to be digging around for his phone all the time. So even though you're kind of marketing it to bicycles and motorcycles, I think there's a lot of other applications.
It'd be fascinating to see how people use it, and if we get, just like we have with motorbikes, if we start getting those messages saying, I don't know, for example, from people using it for hiking, or asking if they can use it for hiking, and see what the kind of the next big wave of interest is. Because I would say that we are, as a company, what we want to do is help people to have really good journeys. We're not a bicycle company or a motorbike company. We're like a journeys and adventure company.
I think that's a great attitude.
It doesn't really matter how people are doing it. If there's appetite there, then we're up for trying to help that.
Well, that's awesome. So, Tom, I just want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. I know with a product that's going to be as popular as the Beeline, you're about to be in for a lot of work on your side of the planet. But I want to thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. And I wish you all the luck, and I'm looking forward to all the updates through Kickstarter and finding out all the processes, and much more importantly than that, I'm really looking forward to getting my Beeline in the mail in February and starting using it.
Brilliant. Thanks so much. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, take care.
Sure.
Don't forget to keep checking in with me over the summer by getting connected to one of the show's social media feeds, Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, and especially by checking out the website at horizon.bmwmoa.org. You can email me at podcast@bmwmoa.org, and I'm always looking for guest posters for the blog on the website. If you've got a cool idea for something that you want to say, opinion, fact, motorcycles, whatever, as long as it can be tied into the show somehow and the topics that we cover, I'm interested in hearing from you and posting something that you've written. The next episode of the show will be out sometime around the end of July or beginning of August, and will feature a discussion with Susanna Schick, a journalist who writes about issues involving bicycling, ecology, motorcycling, and women. We're going to talk extensively about the usefulness of electric motorcycles in the real world, and I'm super looking forward to it. Take some time to check out the MOA website at bmwmoa.org and sign up for the 3 free program. You'll become a trial member for 3 months and receive 3 issues of our fantastic magazine, the BMW Owner's News. Even if you don't currently ride a BMW, it's a great motorcycle magazine chock full of tech articles, product reviews, and fantastic features. The MOA also puts on a rally every year, and I'll be doing some interviews and maybe even some live streaming sessions from the rally in Des Moines in mid-July. Here to tell you a little more about the rally is this year's rally chair, Brian Hinton. Are you ready, Brian?
Yes.
Are you sure?
Definitely. As life progresses and we get older, we tend to settle into routine. We grow up, start families, and settle down. We worry about our careers and only later in life begin doing the things that we've dreamed of. In our world today, technology has advanced the way people communicate. We are now an instant society where information is at our fingertips and only a few seconds away. It is my goal to highly encourage all BMW MOA members to take a moment and share your experience of motorcycling with others. Maybe even someone you wouldn't normally speak to. Maybe someone from the younger generation. Your inspiration could be the difference in our motorcycling world. Young riders today are very passionate about style, imagery, and the emotional connection they have with their machines. When you break it down to the simplest way of thinking, young riders today are not all that different than the young riders of yesterday. The excitement of getting on your motorcycle, the feeling of freedom while riding, the experience of being in the picture, not just looking at the picture. Those are all things that are synonymous with being on 2 wheels. I encourage you to talk with your friends and your fellow motorcycle companions about your experience at a rally, be it an international MOA rally, a chartered club rally, or any motorcycle gathering that you've been to. Spread the word that motorcycling is good for the soul, and being with like-minded friends takes our experiences to a higher level. I also strongly encourage you to mark your calendars for July 12th through the 15th, 2018, for the BMW MOA International Rally in Des Moines, Iowa. I promise it will be an epic experience that you will long remember.
Thank you for coming back for the 26th episode of Chasing the Horizon, which featured a discussion with Tom Putnam of Beeline. Stay tuned for our next episode later this month or in early August. Thanks again to all our guests and listeners for giving us their time. We'll see you out there somewhere on the road or off it. Ride safe.